while people were talking, I probably shouldn't have followed Jessica because I have really bad penmanship. It feels like just looking at my lettering up here. It's idiosyncratic, though, so I feel good about that. But I realized how, just by hearing people talk and what the great sound crew can do, is that we could have solved many of the problems of this election because actually all you have to do is turn down the microphone. So if somebody goes over their time or interrupts, all they would have had to do is turn the sound down, and it would be a better country. So that's not really this meeting, but I think it's a sense of the country. I'd start with the big and go to the more specific. I'm not a Quaker. I've never played one on TV or anything, but the sense of what we wanted to do with the sense of the meeting came from my friend Ralph Kaplan, who's a design writer. And when Dorothy Dunn, who started Design Fix, she and I were coordinating a conference at Haystack that would look at craft and design. And she said, let's have Ralph Kaplan end it. And Ralph went to Earlham College, which is a Quaker college in Indiana. And so he would go to Quaker meetings. And at the end of the meeting, somebody would give a sense of what had happened at the meeting. So that was the idea, and then I said, we could try something like that, and that sounded good. And then Perry Price, who was then the director, said, I'd like you to do it. I thought, shit. But, so here I am. I'm going to give you a sense of the meeting. Water is so important to drink. So for me, a conference starts with just getting to the conference. So, I left Deer Isle. Well, no, I left Bangor at 4:45 in the morning, flew to LaGuardia, where I had the touchpad menu. You touch the menu, you spend $21 for breakfast. There's no way to spend less. And then somebody appears with the wrong coffee and then vanishes. You have to wait till they come back. So very little human interaction. LaGuardia, so I have a social impact piece, I thought. You could get rid of all the plug-in stations and the touch things, and everybody who came off, you just give them a cup of coffee and smile at them. And it would be a cup made by a potter, and I have my MFA right now just for thinking of that. Anyhow, so then I went to Minneapolis, and then you start to see people are going to the conference. So we're like little drops of water that are becoming a river or a stream that makes it to Omaha, right on the Missouri River. Omaha, which was a tribal gathering place for the Omaha, and then Lewis and Clark came through in 1804, and the Union Pacific Railroad, and then meat packing. And looking at the scale of the buildings here, I had such a great sense of an optimistic America. You think about when those buildings were built and how people would look at the country. It feels like a kind of very different time. But I think within craft, there's a kind of optimism too. So I think it's good that we're in an optimistic place. Also, you realize that, I just realized this afternoon, that Omaha is the home of Mutual of Omaha, which brought you Wild Kingdom. What a show. That was such an amazing show. Because Jim, the guy, would have to do all the bad stuff, and Merle Perkins would just say, now Jim's going to wrestle with a lion. And that's how, actually, I'm Jim at this conference, because now Merle has said, well, now Stu's going to tell us what the meeting meant. But the original name of the conference was Present Tense, and the idea behind it was a double meaning, and it was Perry Price's idea. So present tense, like we're in the present, and it's like present, like what's tense about the present. So we wanted to explore different things that might be tensions within our field, including leadership transitions at cultural institutions, because there have been a number of those, the difference between a university training and an apprenticeship model, examine those and see what might be a tension in that. And I think, for me, after the first day, it really seemed that it was not either or, that it really was both and, that it was kind of a continuum of different ways that you can be in the world with education. You could be an apprentice, and as Mark Shapiro said, just making a pot could be a radical act. And I think that's as true as doing socially engaged work can be a radical act. So I don't think there are any arguments between those things. And also the first day we saw those great clips from the ACC library. And so I loved it when the reporter asked, how long have you been working at this crusade, Mrs. Webb? And I think what she might have said, it's not a crusade. Actually, it goes all the way back to Africa. And do you know that we're all from Africa? And do you know that we've worked with materials ever since we had hands, and those materials tell us how we can be in the world? And the reporter would have just been enlightened at that point. But then it went on to Jamie Carpenter and Dale Chihuly at Haystack, the school I used to direct. And they looked a little, somebody said, like Cheech and Chong, perhaps. But what I liked, and this will, I think, be a full circle to the first night, is well, they had a great optimism of two makers who had discovered a material. And if you look at that early studio glass, remember Dante Marioni going to Fran Merritt, who's Haystack's founding director, to his house when he was teaching at Haystack. We went in, and Fran had all these pieces that, like, Dick Marquis had made and Dale had made, and they're like these little blobs, you know? But what exciting blobs they were. And to remember, that was not that long ago, but there was that excitement. And then, did you notice who was singing when they were making the glass? Our Nobel laureate, Bob Dylan. And in the background, Bob was saying, "How does it feel?" Now, there's more that goes on, you know, with that song, but I thought, well, that's a perfect thing for craft, because how does it feel is really what's most important to us. It's the feel of the materials, and I think if there's something that's been common through this, our time together, is it's the way we speak with materials and materials speak with us. And then the first night, when Otto talked about Sloyd, and the kind of moral vision that it articulated. So one way, you know, Mrs. Bishop could have said it goes back to, I mean, not Mrs. Bishop, she was Haystack's founder. Sorry, I confused founders. Oh my God. Mrs. Webb said it, you know, in my mind said it goes back to Africa. But I think there's a kind of moral vision that comes out of Europe, that comes to America, that comes to places like Penland and Haystack, that comes to schools like Mass Art and North Bennett Street School, that actually it has an ethical, moral dimension that you can, working with your hands can be a good thing for you as a person. And I think that really, in a way, is a theme that follows through everything that everybody said here, that there's an element of that. We used to know materials very specifically, and like if you took a walk through the Bemis, I actually didn't see any materials. That was a little odd. I mean, I saw upstairs, but it was interesting. But in terms of how people are making, instead of it being always media specific, you know, it's kind of a mashup world where you can pick and choose what you want to use, which can be great. I didn't realize I was a creative. What a cool thing. Like, who's not a creative, though, I wonder? Like that would be a weird way to divide the world, but it's an interesting term to claim a certain kind of territory. But things have certainly loosened up in a great way. The internet has been amazing. I love the project that Jessica had where people could actually see a design process and follow that. But I'm also reminded of when Dorothy Dunn was talking about how you would go to a place and know that place. It's great to know about it on the internet, but she said, how can you there's nothing that duplicates that actual experience of being in a place. And so I think the internet's a great tool for getting us to a place, but I don't think learning everything on YouTube is really going to get you the same feeling as being somewhere and doing something. Deadlines are great. I was like writing notes all the way through this, thinking this is like my book report, you know, like the book report where I'd say, you know, I read Wuthering Heights. The part I liked best was when Heathcliff's on the moors. I'd recommend it to anybody who likes England. But when I was leaving, I was director of Haystack for 27 years. And when I was leaving my job, I was invited to be on Maine Public Radio. And so I'm driving the hour from Deer Isle to Bangor to be on the radio station, and I'm thinking, oh no. It was a call-in program with one interviewer and you know, about my experience. And I thought, oh no, she's going to ask me about what craft is. And I thought, I've avoided answering this question for 27 years, and now I'm going to be on the radio and I'm going to have to answer this question. And sure enough, I like Jessica, not this Jessica, the Jessica on the radio. And it was not Jessica, it was Jennifer. Jennifer asked me what craft was. So on the way up, I thought, when she asks it, I'm going to know what it is. Because in a creative process, you all know there's nothing like a deadline, right? It really focuses your attention. Like if I were to say to you, you're all going to die, me too, that really focuses your mind for just a second before you think, that's not going to happen to me. Everybody else will be okay. Anyhow, I thought it is a combination of skill, knowledge, and intuition. And that's present in all the work we see. Now, that can vary in terms of, if I were to do a bar graph, like how much skill goes in, how much knowledge, how much intuition. But anybody making anything has to know something about what was before him or her. They have to have some skill to be able to make the thing. And so those are two parts that are important. But the third part, I think, is once you know the material and once you know the history, then there's a certain part where you, as a maker, have intuition. And to me, that's the part that takes your breath away. And so when you look at a work of art, and like for me, it happens sometimes with poetry. Somebody read a poem and the audience might go, like that. And it's that moment where you sense what the intuition was that was in it that took you to a place you didn't think you were going to go. And it's a combination of those things. It's knowing the material. It's not just you. It's the material, and it's the knowledge you have and what you just brought to it at that moment that makes it happen. You certainly could see it in the work that we saw by the artists. I was so struck by Sonia's work, even though I've seen it many times, that how she invoked the power of metaphor. And metaphor is an amazing thing because it makes one thing be another thing. And I was listening to Fresh Air, the Terry Gross program, one time, and she was talking to John Dominic Crozan, who's a theologian. And he was talking about the virgin birth and saying what a metaphor it was. And then Terry said in the NPR kind of laughing voice, do you know that one? You get that laughing voice, I understand now, by smiling when you talk. So you saying the virgin birth is just a metaphor? and she's talking to a priest, and he said, he paused and he said, well, I wouldn't say, I'd say it's a metaphor, but I wouldn't say it's just a metaphor, because a metaphor is the most powerful thing that we have. And I think you could see that in work that takes you down through layers, that connects you to other parts of the world. And I think that metaphorical thinking was present here. Yesterday, I wrote a whole thing thinking I wanted to say what we were missing here. But today I found it, and that was that, the issue of, how did Tanya put it? Solve your brown problem, she said. We definitely have a problem in terms of diversity, or perhaps we would say equity. How as a field, and what is a field? I mean, it's a very, there's a field that we call contemporary craft. There's craft around the world that unites every maker, and that goes all the way back down to our roots. So it's a very narrow definition of who gets to be involved in that. But I think today we began to address it, and I think earlier this year I organized a panel at the Renwick Gallery in Washington, and it was the Renwick Alliance had asked me to do a panel on craft that would be exciting. So I asked 4 people I knew who were doing interesting things, and they were Sonia Clark, and you know Sonia's work, David Keefe, who's the head of Combat Paper New Jersey. It's a group of veterans who cuts their uniforms into small strips, makes that into paper pulp, and makes images related to their combat time. And they also do writing on it. Teresa Secord, a Penobscot Indian from Maine, who's head of the Maine Indian Basket Makers Alliance, who saw a dying tradition and developed an apprenticeship model. So now there are 250 basket makers, and when there had been virtually none before that. So she revived a tradition. And Allegheny Meadows, some of you know who, he's outside with his trailer right now, drives an Airstream trailer around and kind of markets work in a way where you wouldn't expect it, so he could park it outside the Museum of Modern Art. And we did this in Washington. So I'm thinking, there's something about being in Washington that's such a symbolic city. And after everybody had finished, we had a veteran talking about what craft could be in terms of expressing yourself, an innovative thinker about marketing, a Native American who had found a new way to market work, Sonia, who's investigating the cultural divides, racial divides within our country. I thought, like these are stories that, it's better than like in the hotel. I suppose you watch it all. You can watch CNN or PBS. It doesn't matter. It's like, that's not all the news. I thought, this is the news, and I felt like this is America, and it's part of America. That should be the news we're hearing. So I felt like today that was represented, and I think that's such an important thing for craft. And I also realize, as we've been working on this for a number of years, that it's not easy. And I was talking with Fo Wilson and Sonia Clark at lunch about how easy it is to make an assumption that's not right. And you're within different races and different cultures. And I think what I've learned just from that conversation at lunch today in a way is you can say the wrong thing, and that's okay, because it's like when you're making art, you're going to make mistakes. And when you're trying to bridge gulfs, you're going to make mistakes. And I think that really is important, that we need to be able to fail in terms of talking about the issues to get there. Which leads me to just one final thing. I've been thinking about the power of craft, and that is I'm going to switch from Quaker to Judaism now just for a little bit, if I could. Today I am a man. And so that's kind of a Jewish joke I can tell you later. But in Judaism, there's a principle called, a tenet called tikkun olam, which means to heal the world. So, and that's everybody's obligation to heal the world, which I believe through the work that you saw this afternoon, that there's some work to make something better. You don't have to be the one who heals it completely. You just have to do that. And so I think I'd just like to leave you with this poem that I wrote. It actually was based on a work by Kate Rhodes. You might be familiar with a working class worker who stitches using copper wire a glass marini that she cuts and puts together. Holding the light. Gather up whatever is glittering in the gutter, whatever has tumbled in the waves or fallen in flames out of the sky. For it's not only our hearts that are broken, but the heart of the world as well. Stitch it back together. Make a place where the day speaks to the night and the earth speaks to the sky. Whether we created God or God created us, it all comes down to this. In our imperfect world, we are meant to repair and stitch together what beauty there is. Stitch it with compassion and wire. See how everything we have made gathers the light inside itself and overflows. A blessing. Thank you.